And President Trump recently visited the Bay Area, his first trip here since taking office. It was brief but controversial, and he was quite critical of San Francisco. KPAX 5's Phil Matier and I asked former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown about Trump's claims that this city is a disaster.
Typical Trump, totally without any credibility whatsoever. He looks around to find something that's popular to discuss, and particularly if it's under Democratic jurisdiction, and he proceeds to exploit it. And that's what he did.
Well, quick question. Was what he said true or not true?
Not true.
Well,
they were not washing into the bay.
See, that's the thing. There's this focus on, the sewer system, and technically it's not true, and technically the EPA probably won't be issuing a citation. But the reason why it rang out is because there's a little truth to the fact that we do have too many needles in this city. They're very easily accessible.
There are some challenges.
They're all over the place.
There are some challenges. There's no question. In an urban environment like San Francisco, where everybody loves to live, where the weather is so good, where people are so generous.
And people have open drug use on the streets, and we have the homeless population.
No. We have permission to give people needles. And we don't exchange them. We're supposed to, but we don't. We just let you have a needle because we want to reduce the potential for all the diseases you can be exposed to by using dirty needles. We give people clean needles. Those who receive them, literally, where do they dispose of them? That's a problem that we need to address. But we don't need Trump calling it to our attention.
Well, I mean, if you look at where the federal building is, you can imagine all of the people who are talking to him about, and actually there's several federal buildings in the Tenderloin. So if you look at what they're seeing every day, he comes to town, they say, this is a disaster.
San Francisco and Los Angeles, California rule, and we do have a crisis on our hands in terms of homelessness. It has gotten worse in the last 2 years than anybody had ever imagined.
And that's because we are so humane in our treatment of people who are challenged, whether it's addiction, whether it's a mental problem, whether it's a poverty problem. We are, as a state and a nation, we are comparatively much more generous.
Okay, so the question then becomes, is it what he said or who said it and how he said it?
At all times, the utterer is a challenge to accept when you know he's a fraud.
Ooh, a little politics there?
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of, it seems like there's almost nothing he could say that anyone would agree with.
By the way, is there anything he could say that you would agree with?
Mr. Willie?
I feel like Willie considers himself the mayor emeritus of San Francisco, and it's going to be a little bit outraged at anything that when anybody takes a dig at the city.
That's true, but he'll also admit that homelessness was an issue when he was the mayor, and that he was not able to resolve the issue either. And so he admits that this is something that's been going on for decades, and that he doesn't actually necessarily have the answer to what the current mayor should do. But of course, he feels very protective of the city of San Francisco.
Right.
Here in California, new poll results are raising some eyebrows. They show Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren leading the pack in California. Joe Biden's in third, and Kamala Harris is behind and in single digits. So KPAX 5's Phil Matier and I asked former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown what's going on with Senator Harris.
It's a difficult task for her because she has not concentrated at all on California. Whoever's managing her campaign, in my opinion, will not do it the way it should have been done. Clearly, you ought to develop the ability to be the favorite son or daughter in the state from whence you come, which is the way it was in the olden times when we were selecting people. She needed to concentrate. That incredible send-off that she got in the announcement time back in February in Oakland, it was dramatic, clearly. And 3 or 4 continuous visits here would have placed her at the top of the food chain. Ignored California, not deliberately, but doing all you can to be known in other places causes you not to be doing things at home.
Melissa, when we look at the top 2 contenders on the Democratic front, it is Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Mm-hmm. What does that tell you about the direction of the Democratic Party? If you put their numbers together, they beat everybody hands down philosophically.
Well, it just goes to show you that in terms of who's responding to the polls, saying, I do intend to vote, because that's who we're looking at. in the Democratic primary. It tells you that if you put those together, you've got a really big progressive coalition. Now, remember, though, in California, for example, the biggest group of voters and the fastest growing group of voters is decline to state. So if you look at just sort of who are the Democrats who are voting, yes, they look like they're moving left, they look progressive, but there are folks who are saying no to the party altogether.
Mayor Brown, Kamala Harris decided early on to be a progressive candidate. She was
Mistake.
Okay, because she was traveling in the same lane as Warren and Sanders, and they have overcome her and forced her out.
Absolutely, total and complete mistake. You should always be yourself. Believe me, 3 a.m. in the morning, she keeps talking about. In law school, they'd say you'd better know a particular law in the real property, life estate, or whatever it is. You got to be able to cite that. In the world of politics, don't be a candidate, be a person.
Yeah, it seems like the trend line for her is not good. She seems to be trending in the wrong direction.
That's right. After that bump she got back in July after her first debate performance, she very quickly went back down into single digits and has sort of stayed there. And her campaign has tried to reboot a few times. Now they're focusing in Iowa and sort of changing the strategy. But it's a tough time to be really switching gears.
Momentum, attention, and enthusiasm are very mercurial, and she seems like she's lost it, at least for the moment.
Well, and also, I agree, but also it also seems that once you sort of get labeled second-tier candidate, it's a really difficult thing to break out of. And so her plan to really peak later, isn't necessarily intrinsically possible once the public sort of view you as in one category.
Gotcha.